Welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. We have another follow-up. I think this is the third or fourth one. I think third one that we've done so far. And I'm really excited for this one. This is a guest that Matt interviewed. And we have Katie back on. So I'll give a little, actually, Katie, you're the one that listened to the episode more recently. So can you sort of, for our audience, just kind of talk about, what your episode was about, what you and Matt talked about, where you were at when you recorded that episode, and then I'll kind of help fill in the blanks, and then we'll give them an idea, because every time we tell somebody to go listen to a former episode, they never do. So we'll just pretend
Really?
like,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, they're already listening, they're in the car, they're driving, we'll kind of let them get a little update, then they'll remember your interview probably. So tell us
Okay.
a little bit about your interview with Matt and what you guys talked about and where you were at with your practice.
Sure. So it's now January. I interviewed with Matt in June of 2020, and we had been back from the office from COVID for about a month at that point. So at that point, coming back, I wrote down all my averages and everything.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, because I haven't really reflected on any of this stuff, so this was like a good opportunity to do that. So
Nice.
I opened in October of 2019. The averages that we were doing from 2019 to before we got shut down from COVID, the average was 43K a month. We had gotten
Wow.
to like 50 to 60, and I was like, I couldn't foresee doing anything more than 60,000 a month on the 3 days I was working. I didn't want to work more days if I didn't have to. I didn't feel like we had the patient flow to work more days than that anyway. I was against hiring a hygienist because I was terrified after COVID. I think that's what you titled my episode actually.
Really?
Um,
What did we I don't title them. What was it called?
COVID cautious, maybe something like that. Like
That's
overly
funny.
cautious, crazy person in general. But yeah, I mean, COVID was pretty traumatizing for me. Like I didn't know what was going on. Thank God I wasn't cash poor at that point, so it was okay. But yeah, I was clearly tapping out my abilities within the practice and could not see anything bigger than that, even though I knew, like I hear plenty of stories about people doing way more than that. So I had that first interview with Matt. I listened to it a few times afterwards when it came out. I was able to get to I was able to get over 60K a month. And then I finally was like, screw this. Let me see if I can start some coaching. Like I knew I needed it. So I started it with you at the end of August. I remember you clearly telling me you need to hire a hygienist before our next call or I can't do anything for you. Like I can't change anything for you. So I did it. I didn't really want to because I don't like growing my staff, which is a problem that we're having right now in my growth mindset. So I hired the hygienist. She started at the very end of September, and I don't know that you've looked at my PBN at all. So we'll say
I'm looking at it
December.
right now.
Okay, December 2020. We hit over 90,000 in production, adjusted production, and halfway through January now, we're already over 80,000 in adjusted production.
That is insane.
Yeah, I don't really get it
Wow.
either,
Yeah. Isn't that
but it
cool?
happened. I don't get it.
So for those of you, I'll give you guys so I didn't listen to the episode recently. So after our call in December, what I told Katie to do is I said, go back and listen to your practice underwater. So she kind of started like in the 50-ish range. And, we started working together in August. And then she was at 90 by December. And so that's like 80% growth, something like that. And
Yep.
like, and I told her, go back and listen to, because I remember my memory of her interview and I have not re-listened to it. I listened to it before we did intro outros. I was actually, I remember I was in the car listening to this and I was thinking about, I was like, man, her thing with hygienists, I just can't understand. That was the thing that got me, because if you listen to the interview, what she was talking about is how she likes to do the cleaning because she thinks she can form a great relationship with the patient. And then, she's worried about her ability to convert treatment without a hygienist, or without a hygienist. She can do it well. And she was concerned that with a hygienist, she doesn't have the relationship with the patient. And so she was all pro dentist doing the cleaning. And I was listening to that like, okay. And, Yeah, it was really funny. And so if you guys remember that interview, and then the other thing that I really took from it, one of the things I really took away was you were like, I don't see how I could physically do more than, was it 60? I think
Yeah.
there was a number you referenced. You're like, I can't see how I could possibly do more than that.
Yep. With like about 50 new patients a month, how can I do more than 60?
Yeah. And so you're at 83 month to date, really?
Not 83, but like 81 maybe.
Okay. And so how has that felt for the last 2 weeks doing 81 out of, and she's still working 3 days, by the way. She works Monday, Wednesday,
Yeah.
Friday.
So I'm still working 3 days. On our last call, you told me I've gone back and forth with you on this on like, I need a second hygienist. I'm ready. And then I realized like, oh, no, no, like mentally I'm not. You're right. The practice needs it. I know that the practice needs it. I'm getting more ready now. So it's surprising that we did that number without the second hygienist. So how has it been the last 2 weeks producing that? Like it's the same way I felt when I talked to Matt before in June. I'm completely personally maxed out. I have two assistants now, and everybody runs around like a crazy person and tries not to let the patient know. But that's incredible still that we have that much capacity. So like,
So
what's it going to be when we add the second hygienist? I don't know.
So this is funny because Katie is the kind of person that, so when we started, she had one front office, one assistant, and no hygienist.
Yeah.
And I this was the conversation was, and I mean, Matt made it very clear in the episode, like, you've got to hire a hygienist. And it had been a couple months and he didn't do it. And so I was like, look, I'm not going to tolerate this. And so what I made it very clear, like, if it's not done by the next call, like, we can't work together. Like, there's nothing we can do. And to your credit, it was done. And I was, yeah. And it's funny because, it was the hygienist and the second assistant were the two big ones for you.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that we bump into a lot is staff, like the resistance to growing your team. Like, your practice has had the capacity and the demand to keep growing. It's actually been your mindset around this that's kind of been, the hardest part for you. So can you talk to our audience about that and what it's been like to stretch? Because I think a lot of people go through that same issue of the fear of having high overhead, high staff overhead. It's like a big concern for dentists. And can you talk about, what it's been like to double, your payroll is more than doubled in the last
Yes,
4 or 5 months.
for sure. For sure. So I would say, I think I always kind of knew that I was purposely stunting my growth because I didn't know if I didn't like the idea of our systems and everything breaking and giving people a bad experience because we were growing past our capacity. So I purposely stifled it. But and now adding more people. Let's see. What I told you when you asked me to send you my takeaways was that I was worried about the overhead of adding that extra hygienist. And when I calculated the numbers, she, with just her production, pays for my entire team. That is crazy. That's crazy to me. I didn't think that even hiring one, was like, I'm not going to make money off of them. That's not the point. But that still happened. I am making money off of her. The
Yeah,
point
a
is to
lot.
increase my capacity within the office on those 3 days that I want to work. And still, it's completely gone over that. She pays my whole payroll.
Yeah. And so what other takeaways did you have from your episode when
Um,
you went back and re-listened to it?
yeah, the nice thing of like having listened to you guys for so long is you and Matt say the same things over and over again, and it's focusing on what to do, like just those couple things. What are those things that you're supposed to focus on? And I've had asked Matt in that last episode we did together, was like, what is the next thing that I'm supposed to do now? So I upped the marketing like slightly. We can call that pretty negligible because it's just not that much marketing that I do for the number of new patients I get. I'm sure, a lot of reasons for that, but I don't fully understand it. So we won't go into it too much. But I would say he was talking about me doing implants. I was resistant to it because I still don't. One day I'll get there. I always thought that Invisalign was the big thing that was going to happen in my practice. And you pushed me to do it. So I got the iTero. And then I start throwing around things like, oh, I need to get the sedation done. I need to do the sleep dentistry. I need to do this and that. And you're like, no. Table those things. Focus on this one thing, get really good at it, and make sure your team can do it too. And that, in addition to growing the staff, is what has caused the explosive growth.
Yeah, I
Narrowing
think it's, for our audience that do you understand how this sounds as a listener sometimes? Like the amount of growth in such a short period of time, how hard it is to believe. Like you're sitting here 2 weeks into January, at over $80,000 of adjusted production in a 3-day a week office that 6 months ago was not doing 50. Like,
yeah, I don't get it either. I told you what I think that we just did, but that's why I went through this exercise where I was like trying to figure out what my averages were before I started with you and all that stuff, because I still don't totally understand how it happened.
It's hard to understand how it happens. And you said something that I want to touch on, because I had James on and we had the same thing. And, every time our clients get the growth that they get, the one thing that they always say is, it was way easier than I expected.
Yes.
And it doesn't feel real.
It doesn't.
And you said those same things. And so I kind of wanted you to talk about that on air, because people, like, even for my practice, we're doing 2.5 times as much as when I bought it. And that doesn't feel real either. It's hard because you see the numbers on Practice by Numbers, you see the production collections, you see the whole thing, but it doesn't feel, it's hard to describe that feeling, right?
For sure. I feel more safe than the way I was talking in my last episode with Matt. I feel more safe. I know that. I have less cash concerns and worries about everything burning to the ground all of a sudden and all the COVID uncertainties. And I certainly have grown my stomach lining, but it's still, no, it doesn't feel real. It's not like, oh yeah, I made it, I'm done. That's not it.
So what does it feel like?
It's exciting for sure. It is.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know. You think that it's gonna mean something way more, and it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that all the time. A lot of people say that, but finally, like, I get to experience it, and there's good and bad to experiencing that.
Yeah, right. It's that whole thing of, you're trying to get somewhere so much. And then when you get there, you're like, really? I feel like the exact same person that I was 6 months ago.
For sure.
Isn't that like really unnerving?
Yeah, it's kind of freaky. Like,
yeah.
not that much has changed. And even within the practice, the team dynamics are different, because going from a team of 3, including myself, to a bigger team, and now we're probably going to add another person, that's different. But the rest of it, no, it doesn't feel that different. It doesn't feel that hard. I don't feel desperate anymore, which is the best part about it, I would say.
So if we had to boil down what we did, it wasn't all that complicated. It's the stuff like, did we do anything that we don't talk about all the time on Practice Underwater?
No. That's why I'm still so surprised. Like, yeah, could I have done this, like, listening to your show and by myself to a certain degree? I would, like, but this fast? Fuck, hell no. I'm sorry. No, like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. This would have taken me a very long time to get to. And I think part of it is like confidence thing. Now I have Mastermind to bounce ideas off of, and just like feeling less alone in it is really helpful too. But it is narrowing your focus and figuring out the couple things that really are going to make the difference.
And so I think that this is one feedback we get a lot from clients, is that the confidence that the analytics give them in a decision that a lot of people don't necessarily think, like we went from the conversation of 1 hygienist to 2 hygienists within a period of like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Like we didn't even go through a full recare cycle with the first hygienist before I was already pushing for the second one.
Right.
And that makes people really uncomfortable.
Yeah. I'm still pushing against you for it, and I know it needs to happen. So I'm looking already, but we'll do it.
So what other takeaway? Did you have any other takeaways? I have some things that I would talk about, but I was curious if you had anything else from your episode to kind of. I think people are probably jogging their memory. If they've listened to it, then they know. If they haven't, then they have no idea what we're talking about.
Um, yeah, I think my fear, I still have certain fears that are like still persisting. I still have a lot of mindset issues. And I think that I've grown as a leader and like personally in the last year. COVID was really helpful for that actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming away from that and not being like just scared of everything made a big difference. But being afraid to expand the team is still clearly one of my big fears, and it's totally holding me back.
Yeah.
I'm still slowing down my growth, like semi on purpose.
Yeah. And I love that you just say it. And that's the thing that I've really appreciated about working with you is that you'll call it what it is as opposed to trying to make it about other stuff.
Yeah.
And this is where, it's nice to when a client can just say like, I'm just not comfortable going there, even though I know it's probably the right thing to do. Like the analytics don't lie, but at the same time, I'm just not comfortable yet.
Yeah.
And that's, the conversation we had last time was that we try to stretch as far as possible, but we want to stop right before we pull a muscle or right before we go a little bit too far and make you a little bit too uncomfortable. And that's part of it too, because like, so the saying that I have of it's not hard, it's uncomfortable. Can you talk a little bit about that and talk about how, the trajectory of growth, it wasn't like, I think that's the one thing that I want to make it very clear. Like our process is not hard. Like I keep saying that and people don't understand and it can it rubs people the wrong way. Sometimes it sounds arrogant to them, but you listen to the first interview, maybe we did like 3 or 4 things, but the key is the 3 or 4 things we do were exactly the 3 or 4 things she needed for her practice based on her data. And so those 3 or 4 things all going in the same direction over a period of time lead to explosive results. And she hasn't even hit her 6-month recare yet. Like once she hits the 6-month recare on the first hygienist, like, it's going to compound even more. But, it's, but the challenging part of being the dentist going through all that growth is usually we're pushing you in an area where you're uncomfortable. Otherwise, you would have already done it. So
Exactly.
can you talk a little bit about that and, the experience of it and kind of the uncertainty and the unsure if it's going to work and like the feeling of getting overhead before you get money, that whole thing?
Sure. Um, I mean, every time we grow, it's uncomfortable, like personally, professionally, it's totally uncomfortable. I mean, I don't know. It makes you redefine like what is really hard in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody that I love is like healthy. Like those that would be I think that is very hard. If you have somebody that you love that is sick or something like that. This is so not hard at all. This is just pushing yourself to grow and do things that you have a feeling are going to work and you're not entirely sure. And you still go for it anyway, and you see what happens. And you have to try different things constantly and pivot when things like COVID happen, or you have a month in a startup where you don't have as many new patients or as much cash flow as you thought you were going to have. Like all of that is uncomfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. Uncertainty is uncomfortable, but you get rewarded for it if you keep going.
Yeah. And, it's like Katie's been saying, right? There's been specific things that she just won't do, even though she knows they need to be done because they're just a little bit too uncomfortable. And I talk about this a lot with James when I did one of these, was the flow of from decision to dollar is what I call it. And that's from the time you make a decision in your practice, for example, to hire a hygienist. You have to put out the ad to find the person. They have to start. You start paying them. Then you get patients on their schedule. Then you diagnose treatment. Then you produce. Then you collect. Then the money hits your bank account. And that's like a 2 or 3 month period of uncertainty where I remember in the fall, after we had hired the hygienist, you were sort of like, I'm not seeing it yet. And you kind of had this 2 or 3 month period where you were a little bit annoyed that it hadn't come yet. And so can you talk about that period? Because that's the period where we lose people, is where they will, that faith in the process where you have to wait. And you got it quick. I mean, normally it takes about 9 months, but like, you can you talk about that like period where you're waiting for it and you're not totally sure, and now you have an extra expense that you're thinking about, and like
Right.
kind of that whole period?
Well, to be honest, if we're talking about that waiting period at all, like I didn't know that this growth was going to happen. I thought you were just trying to like take some off my plate so that I could do more as a dentist. I didn't know that this was going to happen. I just thought like, oh, I have too many like I just can't, I don't want to do these prophies. I can't keep doing them. I need to hire a hygienist, duh. And then you hire them and it takes a little while to find somebody that you like and that will work the days that you want to work with. And then there's a weird adjusting period for them to adjust to a staff that is like very small and tight knit. And it's weird to have somebody new in the office. And I don't like that, but it is what it is. And she's like never really worked in an office before because she just graduated. So I have to teach her a million and one things about how our office works. And then you start pushing her and having these very uncomfortable conversations with her. Like, your verbiage on this probably wasn't the way I'd go. Maybe we'll talk about doing it this way. This is how I want you to interact with our patients. This is like the culture that we have. The biggest issue I've had with her is how she interacts with the rest of my team that I love so much. Because, like I said in my last interview, hygienists are divas, and I've had to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations with her about that stuff. So once she got it, because she had to go through her whole period of discomfort and she became more comfortable with like doing what she knew she was supposed to do, I relaxed for sure. So that all of that was totally worth it, because then my day was just, I could do my dentistry. I knew she was taking good care of my patients, and like that was great. That made it totally worth it. And then like as a bonus, which is what you were going for, we I've almost doubled. Like it feels like overnight. So all of that was very uncomfortable, and I didn't fully see where we were going with it the way you did.
And it's funny because so one thing about Katie that, like, look, she reached out to me personally. Katie and I have known each other for over 3 years.
Yeah.
We've had a personal relationship, and so we've been friends for a long time. And so she reached out to me directly, and I told her, like, you have like a very simple case. There's nothing that I'm doing here that's super unique. Like, this is my only solo client that is not Ike, and it's so this doesn't need anything special. It's kind of a very straightforward case. Nonetheless, like, what it wasn't like that challenging, but I think that the point I'm making is our process is the same with everybody. But the thing that Katie does differently, and I think is the reason why she's doing really well, is because of what you just heard. So you kind of got to see a flavor of her leadership right there with what she was saying. She was like, I have these uncomfortable conversations with hygienists, and I tell them, I know this was nice verbiage, but this is how we do it here. And that's the one thing about Katie that she doesn't give herself enough credit for in our relationship. And I think she's really good at is as a coach to her staff, and her leadership. And she doesn't take things, she's always willing to have those uncomfortable conversations with her team. And I think that's an area where a lot of solo dentists especially tend to not be able to have those conversations. They'll see something that they didn't like from their hygienist, but they don't want to say anything because it's kind of awkward, and the whole deal. And that's one area where we've been able to go fast because you listen,
Mm-hmm.
and you're willing to do it. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that not every client brings that to the table. And so as a coaching company that tries to replicate this type of thing, it makes it challenging when we can provide all of the same 3 or 4 things. Every single coach at Shared Practice will tell you the same 3 or 4 things. It's just, would you do them? And would you be able to lead your team? Those are all things we can't control. And that's one thing that I think you do really well that, I want to make sure our audience knows. And I kind of want you to address that solo dentist that's uncomfortable having that conversation with their team, because they're out there and there are many of them.
Thank you. I have very good example of this. It just happened on Friday, a few days ago. So because we got our iTero and we do a lot more Invisalign now, that is the one bonus system that I have put in place for my team. When we start Invisalign cases, a patient has financially committed, you get a bonus. It's split 4 ways because I have 4 team members. And we write the patient's name down like in the kitchen on a whiteboard, and it's super motivating for them. I just implemented it 2 weeks ago. It's amazing already. So last patient of the day, in hygiene. I had talked to her about Invisalign 6 months ago. She had told me something about it, and I couldn't remember exactly what she told me, but I was like, we've talked about Invisalign, right? And she was like, yeah, you told me like I probably wasn't a great candidate for it. I was like, well, I have, that's the other thing that I do. If I find something clinically that my patients need, like I will dive into the CE that's required to become confident at that. So I was like, no, we can do this. It's predictable. This is what I think is going to happen for you. Do you think you want to start? So she's like clearly very interested. This is our last patient of the day on a Friday. I, in my schedule, have a crown seat, a crown prep on a patient who's crying because she didn't know she had to get numb for a crown prep. The Banco guy is there because like my chairs are breaking. And then I don't know, there was one other patient that something happened. I don't remember. So I have all of that going on too, but I still take the time to have that 1 minute long conversation with my patient. Then I say to the hygienist, okay, why don't you go ahead and scan her? And I'm going to have one of the assistants show you how to take Invisalign photos while I go talk to the treatment coordinator real quick so that she can get this all set up for you. I'm like, go in the back, go do my crown prep by myself because my poor assistants are like completely bound up with the Benko guy and my other two patients. And my hygienist apparently takes her time scanning the patient and is kind of refusing to do the Invisalign photos. This is what I'm told later. And I like, my mind was blown afterwards. Like, you are now bonused for this, and you are being resistant to getting the actual data that I need to be able to start this case. Do you not want that bonus that is happening? So my poor assistants are like beaten down because she has been difficult towards them, not towards me, towards them. So now I had to have a very difficult conversation with her, and I had to do it via text because she left. So I did it via text. It actually turned out very well, and she sent a mass text to everyone in the office. Thank you so much for helping me with everything. I know today was really crazy. I really appreciate everyone's help. And I could tell, like, both of my assistants text me afterwards, like, I'm so glad she said that, because I was just foreseeing on Monday, none of these girls are going to work together. They're all against each other now. And thank God I addressed it right then and there, because I would have taken the weekend and thought about it all weekend long and dreaded Monday.
That's awesome.
When I first used the Elements app from Dentist Advisors, I realized a few really cool things. First off, you get into the app and it helps you calculate your current net worth. So you plug in all of your assets, you plug in your debts, and it pumps out not only your net worth, but also you can track your savings rate, your practice profitability rate, your liquidity, a whole lot more. And it reaffirmed immediately to me the power of practice ownership. If you buy a healthy dental practice and take out a loan, and then simply pay down that loan while improving that practice each year, you now are well on your way to having enough assets to make work optional. The next thing it did for me was that it got me excited about getting organized, getting everything in there, having it be accurate. So that net worth number was an accurate number, and I could see it change over time. It turned it into a game. I'm now excited about getting organized, having a plan, and making that number move rather than being stressed out by, I should be doing this, that, and the other. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to get organized. I feel like it's all a little bit out of control. It's now clear and something I'm excited about. If you want to have this same experience of getting organized, seeing your net worth, and then having a plan to move forward on that, go to dentistadvisors.com/shared beta.
So many things I want to touch on there. We'll get to the iTero and Invisalign. That's something that I want to talk to you about specifically.
Sure.
But how the bigger team dynamic just kind of showed itself in that story, right? And I think this is more of a conversation between me and you than but that's a bigger team problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like very typical bigger team problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that you were terrified of.
Terrified. I still am. That's why I don't want to hire the second hygienist when my first one still acts like this. She's not quite there yet. We're close, though.
So how was that handling it?
If it had been in person, I would have been, I wouldn't have been very nice. So maybe it was good that it was over text, and I gave her, I threw a bunch of compliments in there too, because I threw a lot on her schedule that day, but I was like, hey, I basically said, hey, I noticed that you took a lot longer taking that iTero scan than you normally do. I need you to be aware of everything else going on in the office when you're using that scanner. My poor assistants are waiting there for you to finish scanning so that they can finally come help me with the crown prep that I've done by myself at that point. Like, a doctor should not be doing a crown prep by themselves, and my assistants know that, and my hygienist held them up. So if it had been in person, I would have been like visibly upset. So maybe, like I said, maybe it was good that it was over text, but I'm trying to work on becoming like not having as much emotion in these kinds of conversations in general, because it doesn't add to anything.
And the thing is, like, we always talk about it. You pick your problems.
Yeah.
And you've picked, whether you know it or not, you've picked this instead of, right? Like, your problem before was, I don't know how I'm going to get over 60. Now, like 2 weeks into the month, you're at sitting over 80 with this new problem.
Yes.
So if you could go back in time and tell yourself, you get to pick two things. You get to pick, don't know how I'm going to get over 60 without this problem, or sitting 2 weeks into January at over 80 with this problem. Which one are you picking?
Oh, such a hard question to answer.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And
there.
I think that, and the growing edge for you, I feel like, is continuing to pick this problem, because this problem means the rest of your life is a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. The too many people you have bickering with each other at these things is a great, like, the fact that you had an Invisalign case to close at the end of the day on a Friday.
Yeah.
And like the whole, like, that's a great problem.
That's a great problem. That's why but you have to be like, the way that I'm running this, because I really don't want to go over 3 days a week. And that's the other thing I appreciate about the way that you guys coach is you do the analytics, you do everything, but you fit it into what I want and what I feel like doing in my practice. Like, I will hustle those 3 days a week, but the team has to hustle with me. So if I'm not on top of them and like really paying attention to what they're doing, it's not going to work.
So that's another thing I think we should talk about. So we started, and you said, I only want to ever work 3 days. And
I was
you
willing
like your
to go
3
to
days.
4.
You were?
I do remember saying that in like the
Oh,
email.
I remember you saying that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that. And I will have to go up to 4 in preparation for an associate. But that's the only way I'm doing it. My staff hasn't asked me, like, are we going to go to like 4 days now? Because some of them want more days. I don't know why. Mm-hmm. I mean, I get the hygienist part, but and I'm just like, no, we will hire another hygienist, and when that capacity is maxed out, then I will know we need another doctor, and I will do 4 days until we find another doctor.
And I'll push you on that, but we'll get there, But I think the point is, right, she said that, like, and I say this, and we really mean it as a company, that like our way is your way. Like, we don't have a way. Like, we don't have a number of days of the week that we like to work. We don't have every doc works these hours. Like, that's not our way. Like, you guys bring that to us. Like, this is what I want. And the thing that you said is, I want to work 3 days a week. That's the thing you brought. Mm-hmm. And the thing I told you is, you don't realize this yet, but you're going to need an associate way faster than you think. I told you that on our very first call. Yeah. And the thing that we did was we always, in our coaching department, we have what we call a pivot point. And so we set up a pivot point. So we say, we're going to work this schedule in preparation for when the schedule shifts to an associate. And that's what we set up for Katie. And it was, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then we now have an associate potentially Tuesday, Thursday, and then she might drop a Friday, and then she might work 1 day Wednesday, and then the associate works the other 3 days, because she only has 5 ops. So we don't have the ability to have 2 dentists there at the same time. Right. So that's sort of, but again, it's always the client that brings the request. We don't have a prescribed number of days that we think are best for a dentist to work. We got clients working 5 days. Got clients working 5 days, got clients working 2 days, like, and everything in between, and it doesn't matter. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, so listening to the podcast, all of the jargon that we talk about, how much more sense does it make now? All the catchy, stupid phrases I keep repeating over and over again, like having been through the process, like does it land differently than it used to?
For sure. Yeah. And it's given me a new respect for all of the stuff that you went through in the first 2 years of your ownership is insane. It's insane. All of the pivots that you had to make and like purposely made and like had no choice but to make. It's insane. And you have very slowly been taking me through this journey of like where my growth is headed, because like we talk about the next steps sometimes, but you know that I'm not ready for those. So like, we don't have to discuss it too much. I'm not there.
Yeah.
And I like,
we're very clear on that.
Yeah. Yes. I have a long way to go.
And so I want to talk about the iTero, because I'm sitting here looking at your Practice By numbers and I see $22,000 of Invisalign cases accepted this month.
Yes.
So when we first talked about the iTero, what was I don't even remember your initial impressions on it. So I'm curious to hear your initial thoughts on the idea.
I was not against it, actually. Like I was against the implant stuff because I didn't think that that's what my patients wanted. Mm-hmm. But I was starting to see some of the Invisalign come in, and I was starting to get good at talking about it without even putting in a lot of work to do that. Patients were asking me about it. And now that we have the iTero, so I wasn't opposed to getting it. Finally, when we made the decision, like, you need to buy this, like, you need to get it at this point, then they make me wait 8 weeks once I order it. Like, then I was like really frustrated, and I'd like unpack the whole thing and set it up by myself and all this stuff. And then you have to get trained on it. So like, there's a lot of stuff that goes into making sure that piece of equipment works for you. But, you know, of all the scanners on the market, like, I got the iTero because I knew I wanted it to be an Invisalign thing. And I did enough Invisalign to know that it makes your whole workflow much faster. And then there's so much case acceptance that you get out of the way that they have built everything. So it has completely skyrocketed case acceptance. People think it's cool for sure. But it makes all of these people that kind of thought that they might want to do something like Invisalign or whatever it is, or a night guard. I literally, we took intraorals before, but now because I have the 5D with the Neri technology, I go through and I'm like, oh, like, you see, we didn't get this one angle on our intraoral, and it helps with case acceptance in every way. So in theory, I'd like to scan every patient in recall. I absolutely, like, I'm hard on my team if they don't scan a new patient. Like, don't come get me right now. You're not ready. You didn't scan them. Like, go do it. So the other issue that I see with getting another hygienist is like, shoot, we're really going to be fighting over this scanner once we do that too. So like, that's another problem to have. Still a good problem to have. I don't know.
You guys see the natural solution to that, right? I won't say it to her because I don't think she's ready to hear it yet, but I think everyone listening knows exactly what you do about that problem.
Like, buy another scanner?
It's funny. I had the same conversation with Ashley Hovis when I was at her office. They kept fighting over the iTero. And I was like, why are you not getting another one of these things? And she was like, well, I can't have more than 2. And I'm like, and why not? And now she has 3. And
that's good.
And so actually Kashavi. So I think we need to shout out Kashavi here.
Yeah.
Like,
Kashavi changed our lives.
Yeah. So Mastermind, by the way, I have approached Invisalign about a sponsorship deal with the iTero because of how many of them we sell in Mastermind. And they said no. Like, this whole episode could be an iTero ad. Like, they don't want to work with us. Sure. I can't believe that. Like, they suck in that way. So there's a lot of things I don't like. You know, they suck in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things I don't like. They're not a sponsor, so I can say that. But it's funny because Kashavi has like the Mastermind culture around iTero and Invisalign is really cool. Like, I think a lot of Mastermind members, like, that's one really big tangible thing that people get from Mastermind, from Kashavi specifically, one of our solo pod leaders, is I think every pod leader brings something unique, and Kashavi 100% brings it. The iTero Invisalign dynamic is one of she brings multiple really cool things, but that's I think the biggest value that, people get from her. And it's so
For sure.
incredible to see.
She still only has one. I think that's crazy for her too. So they must be fighting over it too.
She
But
only has one?
yeah, she'll get another one too, like soon, I'm sure. But no, let me talk about Mastermind for a minute. So
Yeah, please.
I think, that's a huge part of my growth too. Huge. I think I told Matt that like it's so lonely, like doing this by myself. It has been so lonely. I'm not married. I don't have like some smart partner to bounce ideas off of. Most of my dental school friends, like we don't talk about this. We're actually quite private amongst each other about this kind of stuff. So it's nice. It completely changed everything when I had a group that I felt comfortable and safe with to discuss these things. And then just like all the pearls, even little things like how do you pay yourself? Like how does this work? These little questions that people are uncomfortable sharing, like in a bigger public forum, I can ask all these people, and then I have all these like side conversations going with like little people in my pod, and having those individual like your Q&A session, my solo pod meeting, Matt's hot seat call, like it keeps me aligned throughout the month, because sometimes you get off track, and these are just nice reminders to be around all these people that are so much smarter than you, that make you better. So I have gotten so much from it.
Yeah, I'm sure Alex would enjoy hearing that one. I think he's done an amazing job cultivating that culture in Mastermind. And, same with Matt. I think those are the two biggest people that really make Mastermind go on the day to day. And, it's really cool because the one, so I want to touch on something with you before we wrap up, but like, I think Mastermind, I'll just quickly touch on it. We have it arranged in pods. So Katie is in a pod with other pod members that are all solo dentists. And then there's Mastermind wide stuff too. So you kind of get like the intimate feel of being in a smaller pod. And then you also have the larger feel of the larger group. And so you can get really close with the people, and the solo pod specifically is very active chat, because we've sort of figured out why. We were always wondering why all the solo pods like are so active, and then the group pod there's like not that much messaging going back and forth, and it's because you guys are alone.
Yep.
And you don't have another dentist working with you every day to like talk about a case or chat with in the office. You're sitting there by yourself. And so I think the solo dentists have really appreciated what the Mastermind offers. I would say they've really gravitated to the community and all the stuff that Mastermind brings. But it's funny. I remember I was on a call with a dentist who actually is now working with our coaching department. But in the process of this call, he gave me the typical like biggest resistance to coaching ever. And you're the perfect person to ask this question to. You didn't need us.
No.
Like you would have done it on your own. And that's the thing we hear all the time is like, I don't really need you. Like I listen to the podcast, I know what to do. And like, it's not, so I'll say this as the person that produces this, like you get parts of it, but you don't get the whole thing on the pod. It's hard. I cannot deliver the whole thing on a podcast, but like we give you as much as we can, and you don't need us. But the people that don't need us are, I would argue, the people that would benefit the most from us.
Yeah.
Because those are the people that would go the fastest, that are the most responsible, that are the best leaders, that when you have all of those things and you bring them into a coaching relationship, the speed that you can go in a coaching relationship is so much faster. And yeah, we could work on those things too, but then the people that come ready to go, the ones that don't need us, are actually the ones that get the most from us. So can you talk about that? Because you are, I think almost all of our clients don't need us, but can you talk about that, that kind of exactly what I was talking about? Like you didn't need us, but like what having support did for you.
Yeah. I always wanted to coach with you guys at some point. And like, however much money it costs, I wasn't worried about that. You all know, if you listen to my first episode, like I'm a hoarder and I like have issues spending money in general, but this was not something that I was worried about at all. I listen to your show and so many others, and I actively information seek, and I do a lot of research. Like there's a reason I was able to create a startup that did hit the ground running. I did research. I made sure I knew as much as I could. So yeah, I could have done all of this. I would have figured it out at some point, but this would have taken me probably 2 more years to do, easily 2 more years. And it would have been a lot more uncomfortable without you, even though you did force me to get uncomfortable. Yeah, completely accelerated growth that I would not have done alone, even though eventually it would have happened.
So that's exactly how I answered the question. I said 2 things you'll get from us that you won't get alone: time, pace, and your experience of it. So this is a big ask me how I know. And my first year of ownership was brutal, and it was me trying to figure things out and making a lot of mistakes and trying to create this philosophy that we now have. And then the second year, once I figured it out, things went really quickly. But then I learned the hard lessons that the growth actually creates, right? The infrastructure issues, the staffing issues, the financial issues, the ugly duckling period, all of those things we talk about, I got to experience them live. And in that process, we've learned a lot. And the thing that we try to give is faster trajectory and better experience and more confidence. And I think that was a thing that, when we have a client like Katie and she's doing something very uncomfortable, we always try to say, like, hey, look, like, this is going to be super uncomfortable. Just kind of hang with me for 6 months and you'll see. And it's that hang with me for 6 months, I know what I'm doing, where someone like her can lean on our knowledge of the analytics and our experience doing this and kind of take herself to a place that she didn't think she could go very quickly. That's what that person gets from us that they don't get on their own. You can never do it until you've done it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can work with somebody that's done it. And I think that's the really cool thing about, and I wish I had this. That's something I say all the time. But if I had this when I bought my practice, oh man, like it's tough for
Yeah,
me sometimes.
seriously.
It's tough for me sometimes to think about if I had our company when I needed it. And that's one of my biggest motivators. So I want to wrap up with, I think that it's really, really cool. And I love that every once in a while we have a Practice Underwater guest that becomes a client because they have a timestamp, a date, and they have a record of everything they've said. And so I want you to sort of like just talk about the experience of both, because you're going to listen to this one too. 6 months from now, this is another timestamp where you're going to listen to yourself talking about the second hygienist and talking about the associate and all of the things that you mentioned in the iTero. And you're going to look back at this one too, and you're going to say like, man, what did I know? And so can you talk about, I'm really proud of you. And I feel like our audience should be really proud of you too. And I kind of want you to talk about, just your experience of having listened to this one. And I guess, I don't know. I'd like it if you acknowledge yourself, but you don't have to.
Thank you for saying all those nice things. It's cool. It like you said, the timestamp is important, and it makes me kind of wish I was one of those people that journaled more, because you don't understand when your thinking starts to shift, because it kind of happens slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And it then, like, I don't know, in 3 months you've doubled your practice or whatever it is, and you still don't even know how it happened. And then I listened to that other episode and I just thought a lot smaller. So I have grown quite a lot.
We talk a lot about mindset, and that's one thing that I think it's sometimes hard for dentists to wrap their mind around how much it matters. So from your experience, how much do you think the owner's mindset matters?
Completely. Completely. That's everything. I mean, that's the reason that the way I interact with my staff is really important. And we wouldn't be able to I have really horrible fees and we're still doing this somehow. And it's because we all work so well together, but that's a mindset problem. And then there's days I tell you about all the time that I am not in a good mood, or the schedule is very light and I'm stressed. So I go into my office because I don't want my negative energy to affect them. And I have to keep having a good mindset and keep being the big thinker in the office. Otherwise, we're not going to go anywhere. And I wouldn't have had this growth unless my mindset had grown as well.
So now this is my favorite part of the interview. So if you listen to one of the ads I did a while ago for our coaching department, I said, and I described my own experience. And I talked about how you work really hard and you're going and going and growing and growing, and you don't really realize it's happening. And then all of a sudden it hits you like a ton of bricks.
I
And you're
forgot
like,
that you did that. Oh, you're
you
so
remember the ad
right.
though,
That
right?
happened.
Yes. So I always like to, so I've had this conversation now 4 or 5 times, and it's one of my favorite conversations to have. So do you remember the moment where it hit you?
No, because I don't think it's happened yet. I don't
You
think it's
don't?
hit me yet.
Yeah. I think it hit you when you did 90 last month.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I was like, what? Yeah, that's true.
That
That
was
was
the time that I thought it hit you. And you were like, oh, I've grown a lot. Huh.
Yeah. I mean, it was literally like a 20, I mean, that was a 30% increase from any other month easily, maybe 40.
And so when I describe it, when you grow our way as fast as we do, you're kind of always looking ahead. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden the present slams you in the face. And you're like, oh, whoa. Like that was a lot. And like, I mean, I'm curious to see what you're going to finish the month at, honestly. Like
Me
you're
too.
sitting at
Me too.
80 something. Like you're for sure it's going to for sure be your first month breaking 100. That's not even a question, but I think you could hit 150 to be honest, which would be really cool.
No, I don't think so.
You don't?
No, I don't think so. I think this is like an exceptionally good month. But what do I know? I still have mindset like issues and a lot of growth to be had in that department. So I don't
We'll
know.
see.
We'll see.
It'll be fun to see.
Yes.
And I think it's cool because I think for you so we've actually finally identified why this happens. So it's this concept called proactivity that we coach with. We're always looking at the future. We're never really focusing on, like, a lot of our calls we're never looking at last month. Like,
no, yeah, you don't ask me about that. You don't care. I don't care.
Last month is gone. This
Yeah.
month is already happening. We're always focused on the future. And that's how we're able to grow quickly, because everyone else is looking at last month. And we're always looking at next month and the month after that. And so when you do that, you're always looking forward. And then all of a sudden the present slams you in the face, because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm here. And it's happened enough times now that we know our philosophy leads to that result. And it's that feeling. And it's the thing I talked about in the ad. And I remember the first time I felt it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all working. I'm looking around, I'm seeing 4 hygienists, 2 dentists, like easy 10K days. And I was like, whoa, like this worked. And that feeling you get, I describe it as indescribable. But for me, it was because I had gone through a lot to get there. Mm-hmm. And it felt like I was never going to get there. And so when I did, I was like, whoa, this is nice.
And I think my issue is, like, I don't know. I didn't have great, well-defined goals to begin with. And I still am operating from that place of like, this is temporary.
Yeah.
So we'll work on that.
We get that a lot. But anyway, we'll check in with you soon. I'm excited. I think we'll set up the next check-in to be, well, I won't tell you when, but I'll let you know when it's time for you to come back on the show.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming back on, Katie.
Thank you. Bye.